He lied. She listened. Then Jasmine Crockett ended him with one sentence the moment Jasmine Crockett quietly leaned forward across the blazing CNN studio, phone in hand. Everyone's expectations for a routine TV sparring match shattered. "Let me show you something," she said, 4 words that instantly transformed the air from charged to combustible. In the space of a single live segment, a 43-year-old Texas congresswoman, young, brilliant, razor-sharp, took aim at Steve Bannon, the grizzled architect of Trump-era politics, and what unfolded was nothing short of a demolition. The world was watching, and in 30 seconds, Bannon went from smug kingmaker to the internet's newest example of what happens when receipts meet bravado. For weeks, Bannon had strutted from screen to screen, hawking his latest conspiracy, relishing a media landscape that usually let his rants run wild. He was used to echo chambers packed with nodding hosts, never the kind of fact-wielding opponent who came with cross-examination training and a digital arsenal. Bannon wasn't just facing a congresswoman, he was up against the ultimate anti-bullying machine, the woman who'd turned courtrooms and committee hearings into her personal proving grounds. Crockett, whose background in civil rights law made her the patron saint of homework, wasn't here to play defense. She'd mapped his moves, cataloged his contradictions, and let him build his own rhetorical gallows as she waited with clinical patience. Bannon started strong, pouring on the bluster. The 2020 election was stolen. The DOJ was a puppet of the radical left. Hunter Biden was running the show. His credentials sparkled. Trump's strategist, Breitbart kingpin, certified patriot for his ravenous fan base. He flailed, invoked victimhood, and even cracked a joke about evidence, fully expecting to bully his way through another segment. The camera cut cyanily to Crockett, cool as ice, her pen dancing over a notepad, her slight smile widening with every lie, tweeted and retweeted in real time by millions desperate for someone to finally take Bannon to task. But Crockett wasn't there to be another unwitting target. She let Bannon run, never interrupting, never showing her cards, until it was time. With the eyes of the nation and the digital world glued to her next move, she delivered those 4 words. "Let me show you something." Suddenly, it wasn't a battle of talking points. It was prosecution, and the evidence was Bannon's own voice, Bannon's own face, Bannon narrating his role in everything he'd just denied. Audio clips, video receipts. On one side of the screen, Bannon's jaw sagged. On the other, Crockett outlined, methodically, every lie, every hypocrisy, every truth Bannon had twisted, his own voice damning him, his rehearsed comebacks evaporating. The crowd in the studio barely breathed. Anderson Cooper froze. The control room's whispered chaos fizzled into awestruck silence. Social media went supernova, hashtags erupting, memes proliferating. Bannon's shock registered forever in that split-second close-up. In a matter of minutes, Crockett revealed not just Bannon's misinformation, but his disdain for his own supporters. A leaked confession, played on air, showing what he really thought of the narrative he'd peddled for years. By the time the segment ended, it wasn't just political drubbing, it was total brand collapse. The internet set itself aflame, and the question, repeated everywhere from TikTok to dinner tables, was simple. Who's next? Because when the truth comes with digital receipts, no bully's bluster stands a chance. If you thought you'd seen viral destruction before, keep watching. This is how legends and liabilities are made. Spotlights swept across the CNN studio, but the real luminescence came from the 2 figures about to collide. Jasmine Crockett and Steve Bannon, 2 names, 2 very different legacies, each with everything to win or lose before a national audience starving for a real fight. On paper, the matchup looked lopsided. Bannon, 70, was a decades-hardened architect of chaos, former Trump White House chief strategist, fossilized in the public consciousness as a kingmaker with a Harvard degree and a Rolodex of dirty tricks. His resume boasted Wall Street millions, Hollywood credits, the alt-right megaphone of Breitbart News, and, most recently, the viral outrage engine of his War Room podcast, a platform he'd used to morph fringe conspiracies into mainstream currency. Bannon specialized in blitzes. He'd seen pundits and politicians with longer titles and bigger platforms fold under his barrage of bluster, half-truths, and weaponized narrative. That confidence was visible in every calculated mess of his appearance, shirt rumpled, hands flying, eyes scanning for any weakness to exploit. Crockett, however, was built for this exact arena, and Bannon, for all his war stories, seemed oblivious to the danger. At 43, she was a freshman Texas congresswoman with the kind of civil rights lawyer backstory that wasn't just resume fluff. It was test-forged steel. Raised on the margins, she had clawed her way through law school, every courtroom challenge etching new resolve. Her victories weren't handed down from academic panels. They were won in battles over police misconduct, voting rights, and headline-grabbing civil rights cases where the odds were rarely in her favor. Crockett's reputation in the House wasn't for viral speeches or flashy stunts, though, as Bannon would soon learn, that would change. She was known on the Hill for forensic prep, for every performance Bannon had given in the conservative echo chambers. Crockett had spent an equal number of hours with receipts, timelines, and a prosecutor's memory for detail. The larger stakes couldn't have been higher. Crockett stood for the future Democrats wanted: young, relentless, diverse, and, most frightening for operatives like Bannon, unwilling to honor the old rules of decorum that protected spin from exposure. She had cultivated her image, purposefully, in contrast to the party elite. For her, dunking on hypocrisy wasn't a meme, it was a mandate. Her base, galvanized by her refusal to blink under Republican attack, saw this debate not as another cable news spectacle, but as a make-or-break audition for the next generation of leadership. Bannon was not just fighting for his own brand. He represented the old guard of Trumpist strategy, the belief that if you talk louder, longer, and lightning fast, you can simply overwhelm inconvenient reality. His followers awaited every appearance for confirmation that the liberals were cowed and clueless. Yet, in the hours before airtime, even veteran producers whispered that Bannon's usual game might finally backfire against an opponent who didn't shout, but simply kept the receipts. Millions tuned in because this wasn't just Crockett versus Bannon. It was a generational standoff, courtroom discipline versus rhetorical mayhem, emerging truth versus entrenched narrative. For Bannon, it was about defending years of self-made legend, about proving that raw spectacle and shamelessness could still set the agenda. For Crockett, it was simpler. The stakes were not just personal but profoundly public. This was her chance to show that the new leaders aren't interested in jousts of opinion, but in checking the old playbook with fact, logic, and meticulous planning. In that moment, as the production team cleared the airwaves and the first question hung in the air, only one thing was certain. Tonight's winner would seize more than bragging rights. They would become the template for the future of live debate, either the last gasp of relentless bluster or the first breath of accountability fueled by unyielding precision. Steve Bannon entered the CNN studio with the confidence of a man whose playbook had never failed him, at least not until now. As Anderson Cooper introduced the segment, Bannon wasted no time shifting into his signature offensive. He was the master of the Gish Gallop, launching a dizzying storm of provocative claims, half-truths, and seasoned outrage before anyone could even call a timeout. To anyone familiar with cable news, Bannon's approach was a performance perfected over years: overwhelm the arena, control the narrative, and throw so much at the screen, stolen elections, weaponized justice, liberal media collusion, that fact-checkers could barely keep up. He spun the Biden administration as Marxist puppeteers, saw woke mobs behind every broken window, and painted himself as the last line of defense between America's greatness and total collapse. Every move was a lesson in dark theater. He dismissed evidence. He mocked so-called liberal critics. He referenced Hunter Biden's laptop with a snort, predicting that Anderson Cooper would gloss over his favorite conspiracies in the name of media bias. Yet for all his bombast, Crockett's calm was unnerving. She seemed to be letting him run, as if inviting him to dig his own rhetorical pit. Bannon's supporters online were cheering. It looked, for now, like he was gaining easy ground. But Crockett wasn't just listening, she was collecting. As Bannon railed against patriots being persecuted, her pen moved with relentless purpose, tallying every misrepresentation and outrage. Lie. While he claimed the 2020 election was the real insurrection, she didn't bother to refute in real time. Instead, she allowed him to stack the deck high with contradiction, a strategy born from years in the courtroom where you never interrupt a witness eager to convict themselves. Bannon's volume only rose. When Anderson Cooper tried to cut in with facts, Bannon bulldozed through, using every tactic: deflection, ridicule, feigned exasperation that had intimidated interviewers for years. Accusations piled up. Crooked DOJ, rigged ballots, fearful Democrats, a vast anti-Trump conspiracy uniting corporate media, deep staters, and woke radicals. The combination of confidence and contempt was designed to rattle anyone unprepared. The audience at home saw the familiar routine: dominate, distort, devour the clock. Yet with each passing minute, Crockett's patience looked less like passivity and more like preparation. Viewers on social media wondered, why isn't she pushing back? But legal minds could see it. Crockett was building her prosecution, letting Bannon harden his own contradictions into concrete. This was not just about debunking a lie or scoring a viral dunk. It was about documenting every thread needed to unravel Bannon's entire performance in a single choreographed stroke. Bannon kept the room hot, but everyone missed the gathering chill. Soon the bluster would meet its match, not in debate, but in the cold light of his own recorded words. And what happened next would prove how quickly a show of dominance can turn into the scene of its own undoing. Bannon had come to play chess, but Jasmine Crockett had been building a checkmate from the first minute, a fact that became undeniable when she leaned forward, eyes locked on Bannon, and coolly declared, "Let me show you something." For 8 solid minutes, the studio had been thunderstruck by Bannon's classic onslaught, volley after volley of stolen election claims, conspiracy accusations, and open defiance of every fact the host or network could muster. Viewers at home had started to squirm, wondering if Crockett would ever get a word in, or if she might disappear into the cacophony as so many others had before her. But Crockett knew better than to interrupt. She was a lawyer by trade, and she understood that sometimes you let the defendant talk just long enough to hang themselves. At her signal, the mood inside the studio flipped. Suddenly, everyone tuned in. The camera caught Bannon's initial smirk, registering the phrase as another failed attempt to disrupt his rhythm. But Crockett wasn't grandstanding. She calmly unlocked her phone, tapped a few times, then raised it to the microphone so the entire room and an audience of millions could listen together. "This is you, Steve," she said. "On December 31st, 2020, would you like to remind us what's coming on January 6th? A clip played, unmistakably Bannon's voice. "We're going to have a wild time on January 6th. We're taking the fight to Congress. This is the day we take our country back." The quote hung in the air like a sudden freeze. Bannon started to fumble, his smile flickering into a grimace. Cooper, uncharacteristically speechless, looked between them, the immediacy of the evidence clear and damning. Crockett pressed on, layering another bombshell. "And this, from the day before the Capitol was stormed. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Your own words, Steve. So when you say you had nothing to do with the insurrection, can you explain these?" The effect was immediate. A visible jolt swept the studio. Bannon reached for words, failed, and blinked. The Twitterverse, already at a low rumble, erupted. A flood of hashtag Bannon busted, hashtag Crockett receipts, GIFs of jaws dropping, and instant split screens of the exchange. But the trap wasn't finished. Crockett moved from insurrection to hypocrisy, firing up a second recording, Bannon famously calling for "lock her up" in reference to Clinton. Then she held up documents, his presidential pardon for fraud, juxtaposed against his on-air framing of himself as the law and order victim. She landed the punch. "You say nobody is above justice except, apparently, when it's you." What made the moment devastating wasn't just the receipts, it was the methodical precision. Crockett wasn't shouting or showboating. She delivered each piece of evidence with the calm certainty of someone who knew the mountain of proof on her side. Every new clip served as another nail, and the audience could feel Bannon's confidence draining out, replaced by something no one could recall seeing before: genuine speechlessness. The atmosphere was electric, yet utterly silent apart from the echo of Bannon's own words. Crockett's strategy had paid off. She didn't have to counter every falsehood in real time, because the trap she'd laid was comprehensive and irrefutable. By the time she looked up from her phone, the narrative was set. This wasn't just a viral moment, but a textbook takedown. Proof of what can happen when truth isn't just told but shown. And with millions watching in real time and the internet primed for the next phase, it was clear. The age of unchecked bluster had just hit a wall called evidence. The studio air, already thick from the shock of Jasmine Crockett's first audio bombshell, was about to become unbreathable for Steve Bannon. Crockett, eyes glinting with practiced resolve, kept her phone at the ready, a digital vault of pain for anyone who ever underestimated her capacity to prepare. As the silence after the January 6th clip stretched, she slid right into the next phase of the takedown. "But we're just getting started, Steve," she purred, voice steady. "You say you're a victim of political persecution, so let's check your own standard on justice." With a swipe, she queued up a montage, Bannon's roaring voice from 2019, hammering at Clinton and the so-called Washington elite with his famous "nobody is above the law" refrain. Then, without missing a beat, Crockett showed a scan of his presidential pardon, granted after Bannon pleaded not guilty to fraud charges that had the potential to end his public career. "Strange," Crockett noted, "how your view of law and order shifts when you're the one on trial." Every viewer at home could see it. Bannon, usually unflappable, was unraveling by the second. His hands clutched the table, his deflection mechanism in clear disrepair. Now Crockett pressed the advantage like the coldest trial lawyer in the business. She played a leaked clip from Bannon's private conversation, a sequence most had only heard about in rumors, where his voice sneered about his own audience. "These people are idiots. The more outrageous the story, the better it sticks. The truth doesn't matter, only the narrative." For 10 seconds, nobody in the studio breathed. The man who'd lectured the nation about loyalty was caught trashing the very base that made him famous. With that, Crockett pivoted again, pulling up a series of exposes. Bannon on air railing against woke Democrats for being soft on crime, juxtaposed against a Freedom of Information Act. Poll showing the full list of criminal pardons and charges he'd dodged. TikTok and Twitter were now ablaze, viral comments pouring in as Crockett, never raising her voice, connected every dot. Bannon had constructed his brand of being the people's bulldog, and here he was, exposed as a self-admitted manipulator, a hypocrite, and a survivor only because of a well-timed political pardon. The receipts avalanche would have been spectacular enough, but Crockett's delivery made the difference. She guided the segment like a cross-examination, calm, clinical, never overplaying her hand. With each audio clip, each document, Bannon's posture diminished, his defiant glare now a stunned, glassy stare. Cooper's eyes darted between them, clearly realizing the lesson had shifted from political jousting to a masterclass in how evidence trumps rhetoric. By the time Crockett leaned back, phone finally lowered, she'd pulled apart everything Bannon brought to the table, his claims, his character, and most crucially, his grip on the narrative. The internet exploded with the footage, clips replayed, memes created, news anchors scrambling for instant analysis. But in the studio, as a national audience watched a king of outrage rendered mute by the avalanche of his own receipts, Crockett didn't need to say another word. Her case, meticulously built, had landed, leaving Bannon with nothing but the echo of his own contradictions to answer for. And for everyone watching, the message was clear. In an era of endless spin, sometimes the quiet avalanche of truth does all the talking. The moment it became clear Steve Bannon couldn't out-argue receipts, his bravado crumbled. But instead of conceding, he reached for the last, oldest trick in the book, the personal attack. Flushed, eyes darting, he tried to reclaim lost ground with a low blow. "You know what, Congresswoman?" he sneered, voice louder but suddenly uncertain. "You can play these gotcha games all you want, but the American people see through you. You're just another angry black woman who hates America." The atmosphere in the studio shifted dangerously, the audience stilled, the crew staring, Anderson Cooper's posture turning rigid as if bracing for impact. Bannon's words, designed to provoke and belittle, instead rang out as both desperate and chillingly familiar. It was a slur meant to drag the conversation from facts to identity, an old ploy to rattle, silence, and shame confident women of color for daring to hold power. Bannon seemed to realize, even as he spoke, that he'd gone too far. His eyes flickered with something between regret and fear, but there was no taking it back. Jasmine Crockett did not raise her voice. She didn't bristle or break. Instead, she sat straighter, her face steely with composure, and let the silence stretch just long enough for the gravity of his words to settle across the country. "Excuse me?" she replied, voice cool as glass, every syllable measured and velvet-edged. "You meant exactly what you said, Steve, and now America sees it too. I'm an angry black woman because I brought evidence. Is that how you defend yourself? By resorting to centuries-old stereotypes when you run out of arguments?" Her tone, calm and cutting, packed more force than any shout. Bannon tried to walk it back, stammering and red-faced, but Crockett pressed forward, not giving him a foothold to rewrite or soften his insult. Let's be very clear. What makes me truly angry isn't being called a name, she continued, now speaking past Bannon and right to the millions watching at home. It's people like you wrapping yourselves in the flag while tearing down the foundations of democracy. It's watching you call others liars while admitting on tape that truth doesn't matter as long as you're winning the argument. And it's the knowledge that, when cornered, the best you can offer is a tired, racist trope rather than an honest defense of your actions. There was a long TV, breaking pause, a generational silence, before Crockett delivered the real lesson. You want to make it personal? Here's personal. I grew up fighting for my community, not just talking about it. I've stood up for democracy, not as a slogan, but in courtrooms and neighborhoods where the stakes are real. You can try to distract from your lies with insults, but you can't erase the facts. The studio, stunned, was utterly behind her. Social media exploded, not just with clips of Bannon's collapse, but with Crockett's phrase, now trending, "You meant exactly what you said." Media voices across the spectrum echoed her calm. Here was composure under fire, the kind of poise that steals thunder from even the most ferocious provocateurs. In that moment, Crockett didn't just win an argument. She turned Bannon's ugliest shot into a national teachable moment. She modeled that the most powerful disarmament of hate comes not with rage, but with righteous clarity. And as the image traveled far and wide, Crockett, unbothered and unbowed, Bannon silenced and shrunken. The new rule was set. Receipts may shatter hubris, but grace under attack is what makes a moment historic. The moment Jasmine Crockett's explosive takedown of Steve Bannon aired live, the digital world erupted. Hashtags like #CrockettDestroys, Bannon, and #receipts. Reloaded shot to the top of Twitter and TikTok, spreading like wildfire across every major platform. Viewers couldn't get enough of the unforgettable visuals, Bannon's arrogance fading into shock as Crockett calmly dismantled his talking points with airtight evidence. From viral video snippets to elaborate reaction edits, the showdown instantly became an unstoppable online phenomenon. Social media users dissected every frame and soundbite. Memes and GIFs captured Bannon's transformation from bluster to speechlessness, while TikTok creators remixed Crockett's most devastating lines over dramatic music. Instagram flooded with split-screen edits of the moment his jaw literally dropped. Even users who usually avoided politics got swept up, using Crockett's receipts as a new blueprint for handling bullies everywhere. Major news outlets rushed to cover the fallout. Headlines framed it as one of the most brutal political humiliations of the decade. Media analysts hailed Crockett's performance as a masterclass in preparation, with many calling it a turning point for how truth can finally upstage empty spectacle. Pundits debated what it meant for the future of televised politics and what kind of accountability the public now expected. On YouTube, breakdowns and highlight clips racked up millions of views within hours. Even traditionally partisan media couldn't ignore the segment's reach. Conservative commentators, while taking swipes at Crockett's politics, acknowledged her rigorous prep and controlled delivery. Liberal outlets celebrated the moment as a win for facts in an era dominated by spin. Beyond politics, corporate trainers and law schools adopted the clip as a case study in high-stakes communication and the primacy of evidence over rhetoric. Behind the scenes, the fallout was immediate and intense. Bannon's team scrambled as sponsors and advertisers quietly pressed for damage control. His absence from social platforms sparked rumors. Was this retreat or strategy? Legal advisors reportedly urged caution as they assessed just how damning his on-air admissions might be. The media circus surrounding Bannon only intensified as each attempted rebuttal fell apart under the weight of his own recorded words. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's star soared, pall-lit. Eichel strategists hailed her as a new standard-bearer for accountability and precision. Grassroots fundraising surged, and offers rolled in for speaking engagements and panels. For many, Crockett instantly became a symbol of what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and when the truth faces off, unblinking, against spin. Public discourse shifted overnight. Her segment emboldened other politicians and activists to adopt "bring your receipts and stay cool under fire" tactics. Misinformation artists found themselves on notice. The new playbook didn't reward the loudest voice, but the sharpest evidence and steadiest hand. The cultural appetite had turned from spectacle to substance, and Crockett's performance marked the moment when justice wasn't just spoken, but shared and replayed by millions. As the memes kept spreading and hashtags shattered previous records for political virality, one truth rang out across timelines. The age of unchecked spin met its match. In a world built on sound bites, the most potent weapon was no longer the loudest shout, but the ability to shut down falsehoods with undeniable truth. The shockwaves from Jasmine Crockett's on-air decimation of Steve Bannon didn't stop at the studio's door. They rewrote the rules of political engagement across America. Overnight, the confrontation became a new cultural watermark. Within hours, political insiders were strategizing about the next debate. Staffers urged their bosses to prepare Crockett style, stockpiling factual receipts, prepping for ambushes, and coaching on how to hold fire until it mattered most. Major newsrooms ran segments deconstructing her every move, while rival congressional aides scoured Bannon's playbook for weaknesses, anxious to avoid being the next viral victim. Even conservative operators took note. The days of rambling unchecked on TV, immune to consequence, were clearly fading. Politics reoriented in real time. Republicans braced for more evidence-based takedowns, seeing what happened to Bannon when past statements could be surfaced in seconds by a prepared opponent. Right-wing media personalities hinted at booking softballs only with Democrats or demanded pre-interview agreements to avoid Crockett traps. Some GOP figureheads quietly cautioned others to stay clear of combative formats entirely, nervously recalling how Bannon's miscalculation had gone from spectacle to spectacle shattering. Meanwhile, Crockett's performance steered the national conversation in surprising directions. Civil rights groups, law schools, and grassroots organizers grabbed the moment, turning her confrontation with Bannon into a tool for training the next generation. Legal advocacy organizations created case studies from the clip, turning her precision into lecture material on advocacy, evidence, and reframing. Communications workshops dissected her delivery, teaching participants, especially women and people of color, how to dismantle intimidation tactics with calm, fact-based authority. HR departments ferrenced the showdown in meetings about respectful workplace dialogue and the dangers of unchecked bullying. Corporate PR teams took note. Companies, conscious of public perception in the digital age, reminded executives that every panel, every webinar could turn into a Crockett-Bannon moment if preparation fell short or arrogance bled through. Some even updated crisis response manuals, building in playbooks for confronting viral exposure of workplace hypocrisy or corporate doublespeak. The effect rippled through digital culture too. Social influencers, podcasters, and YouTubers peppered their live streams with references to Crockett's receipts, framing drama, gossip, and everyday disputes in the language of evidence over excuses. Memes about showing the receipts turned into shorthand for owning the truth and refusing to let distortion win, even in conversations far beyond politics. TikTok creators applied the Crockett approach to debunking false wellness gurus, viral life hacks, and financial experts. Educational settings weren't left behind. High school debate teams studied the exchange, learning that calm wins the round where volume and bluster would have once carried the day. University seminars focused on the new era of public accountability, how digital receipts empower underdogs, and how anyone, armed with facts, can force even the most powerful to answer for their past. Even as the news cycle churned on, the Crockett-Bannon clash lingered as a warning and a lesson. Authenticity, preparation, and a refusal to play defense became the coveted skills for anyone aspiring to lead or even just be heard. Bannon's old swagger now served as a cautionary meme. Crockett's resolve stood as the gold standard. In an age overflowing with opinions, anyone not ready to back up their claims with receipts for TV, the boardroom, the campaign, or the classroom risked becoming the Nimaats. Cautionary tale, outmoded in a world that suddenly wanted proof over personality. In an era where bluster too often drowns out truth, Jasmine Crockett's battle with Steve Bannon became the viral parable for a new kind of political power, one rooted not in volume but in precision, patience, and undeniable evidence. By the time she delivered her closing statements, Crockett had already accomplished what few thought possible, transforming a stage built for spectacle into a forum for accountability, and turning Bannon's own words into the sharpest tool of all. It wasn't just a debate or a ratings-grabbing segment. It was a public reckoning, watched by millions, where the loudest man in the room finally discovered that being unprepared is the cardinal sin of the broadcast age. Crockett's final words struck deeper because of how she delivered them, calm, collected, and unsparing. "America deserves leaders who tell the truth even when it's difficult," she declared, her gaze locked on the camera, letting every viewer feel the weight of what had just unfolded. She didn't revel in Bannon's downfall. Instead, she pivoted, a prosecutor's mind turned public servant, offering disappointment, not rage, and reminding the nation that democracy relies on accountability, not theatrics. In that moment, Crockett set a precedent. The most effective response to viral misinformation isn't louder outrage, but relentless documentation and moral clarity. Bannon, once the master of chaos and kingmaker for a generation of internet-fueled politics, was left reduced and silent, a symbol not just of one man's humiliation, but of what happens when decades of unchecked narrative manipulation finally meet their match. Instead of a knockout punch thrown in anger, it was a chess endgame, every move anticipated, every escape plan walled off by real receipts. The image of his stunned silence, looping endlessly on TikTok, Instagram, and late-night reels, became more than a meme. It was a dig, idle watermark on an era changing in real time. Social media lit up, but the deeper takeaway resonated far beyond trending bars and retweets. The confrontation became an instant curriculum. Brand managers, teachers, and debate coaches all latched onto Crockett's approach as the new gold standard for influence and credibility. No longer was it enough to own the libs or outshout the other side. The new age, as tens of millions now saw, belonged to those who could backtalk with truth, no matter how intimidating the setting. As Crockett rose from her seat, social media and traditional media seemed, for a rare moment, united in awe. Commentators on both sides admitted they'd watched something era-defining. A woman from Texas, armed with nothing but her phone and years of discipline, had just redrawn the map of public debate. It was no longer about who was loudest, who had the grandest title, or who could spin the wildest tale. It was about who could withstand the harsh glare of real questions and still say, "Let me show you something," without fear. So who do you want on your side the next time a bully takes the mic? Someone with catchphrases and a podcast, or the person who comes prepared, poised, and unafraid to go toe-to-toe with power? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this confrontation the moment we finally turn the page on empty spectacle, or will the age of the receipts keep raising the bar? Make sure you subscribe, share your own mic drop moments in the thread below, and ring the bell for the next no-holds-barred political showdown. Because as Jasmine Crockett proved, the only story that lasts is the one that survives the facts.